This app was my biggest flop ever. A Flappy Bird clone in space. As a naive, young indie app developer, I thought this game would take off like the Flappy Bird craze, but the reality was very different. I didn't realize it at the time, but the lessons I learned from this failure would go on to help me create a successful indie app portfolio. If you weren't around during the Flappy Bird craze, I feel sorry for you. This game blew up like nothing I had ever seen before. It offered a simple game mechanic. Tap the screen to make the bird fly through Mario-like pipes. And it's not hard to see the inspiration that I took creating Flappy North. But mine was different. It had space thrusters. It turns out building a game is a complicated process, but it's even harder to get people to download it. At least when you're building a consumer app that's a utility, you're focusing on a keyword that people are searching for. So if they're looking for a body measurement tracker, you can target that keyword. If they're looking for an allowance tracker, you can target that keyword. But who's typing in Flappy Bird astronaut alternative or space physics game? So how do you get people downloading a game they've never heard of? I don't know. I actually don't know. If I was to do it again, I would probably be targeting TikTok and Instagram Reels, showing some game footage and promoting it on there. But in reality, this experience made me desert game development altogether. I decided it's just not worth the time and energy putting all that effort into making a game that takes hours to build only to have 100 downloads. Then, on the other hand, I had an app that I built in just a weekend, and it became a huge success without me doing any marketing or promoting it whatsoever. I just had really good keyword positioning, added some viral growth mechanics, and it took off. This app was my biggest app that I'd ever had at the time. It was generating thousands of dollars per month in revenue, and I ended up selling it a few years later. The contrast between building an app that took me 6 months to create and flopped versus an app that took me a weekend to build and generated thousands of dollars per month, paid my rent and paid my living expenses, really opened my eyes and made me realize just how random luck can be. Some apps can take off, some apps can flop, and it's really hard to tell which app's going to be which. The apps that I've spent time on thinking this is going to be the most successful thing I've ever built end up being a flop. The ones that I built on a whim end up being successful. So I heard the message loud and clear. The message was more apps equals more chances of success. But is that business model still viable today? It seems that these days of creating these small little niche apps for the App Store might be coming to an end. Apple has been rejecting apps based on spam for the last few months. Guideline 4.3a, design spam. We noticed your app shares a similar binary metadata and or concept as apps submitted to the App Store by other developers, with only minor differences. Submitting similar or repackaged apps is a form of spam that creates clutter and makes it difficult for users to discover new apps. Spam rejections may include submitting an app with the same source code or assets as other apps already submitted to the App Store, creating and submitting multiple similar apps using a repackaged app template, purchasing an app template with problematic code from a third party, or submitting several similar apps across multiple accounts. And it's probably the case that Apple is now cracking down on spam apps to combat the ever-increasing amount of AI-generated apps flooding the App Store. And this is only going to get worse and worse in the future as people start to discover how easy it has become to create an app that generates passive revenue from a very simple idea targeting a few keywords. Apple used to restrict their limitations of spam to categories like torches, flashlights, and horoscopes. And people in these categories would often find their app rejected with the message saying there's too many apps on the App Store that already do these exact same features and your app is not contributing or adding any additional value. Even people who have had their app on the App Store for years have tried submitting an update only to find their app being rejected for spam. This has made me a little bit cautious about updating my app on the App Store. Some of my apps share similar code base, and I've even released the source code to my AI wrapper apps to the public to use. And I'm concerned if I do update these apps and submit them to the App Store that I might get rejected for spam because they're now using similar code base to other apps on the App Store, all because of my own doing. I've released the source code and people are creating their own apps using this functionality. And I think this is why Apple are cracking down. These AI wrapper apps are just everywhere. They're making good money. People from all industries are starting to jump onto it. I'm seeing people from the crypto, Web 3.0 starting to jump on the AI trend because there's a quick, easy buck to be made. We're even seeing big tech influencers release their own smaller apps onto the App Store with monthly and yearly subscriptions. But does this business model still work, or should we be focusing on larger scoped projects? The issue is if you spend 6 months developing an app and it fails, you've lost 6 months of your development cycle. And if you're well established, that's not as much of an issue. But I know in the earlier days when I was starting out being an indie app developer and creating my own apps, it was really just trying to get as many apps on target as I possibly could to increase my chances of success. So taking away that ability to create basic apps on the App Store reduces your ability to be able to have those incremental successes along the way, reduces the ability to be able to learn from the development process along the way. And I think it sort of forces you into creating those bigger apps in the future that take a lot longer to build. But my gut is telling me that the best approach to go in my business at the moment, my indie app business, is a balanced approach. And I've talked about this extensively with my current project. I'm building a bigger scoped project that's a video editing app that will use AI to help with the editing process. And in the meantime, I'm pulling out like sections of the app to create into their own apps while I'm building the bigger app. It started with ScreenRiz, which turns screenshots into videos for use on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, and even YouTube Shorts. And now I'm building my automatic captions app, Best Auto Captions, which will make it into my video editing app in the long term. But this feature and this functionality can also be its own independent app. Where it's going to go, I don't know. We sort of thought that AI would just take all of our jobs and remove us from the picture, but it turns out it just empowers people to create more low quality apps. How has the state of the App Store impacted your indie apps? Have you seen an influx in spam on the App Store? Let me know in the comments your stories. Reach out. Tell me how you're dealing with it. Tell me if it's changed the trajectory of your app development business. I'm really interested to know about this one.